It's Carrie Walker, and I work with the Villages Health. Today, I'm going to be talking through how to create meaningful activities at home when a loved one has a dementia diagnosis. I was prompted to put together this presentation because so often families are at a loss of how to continue to spend time with a loved one once they have a dementia diagnosis. Dementia affects a person's ability to do various tasks that they've done all their life, as well as to understand language and to communicate. So that definitely is going to interfere with the ways that you used to spend time with them. So during today's presentation, I'll walk through, first of all, how does dementia affect a person's ability to understand things and to engage in activities that they used to like to do? It's important to have this understanding from a physiological perspective because it'll help give us patience, empathy, and understanding. Based on the fact that the person's abilities are going to become changed and they might not be able to have the skills to participate in the same activities, such as a bridge game or golf, the same way, you're going to learn how to take a look at that activity, break it down in a different way so that you can still spend time with them, maybe encouraging or helping a little bit. You can then use this information to share with other friends and family so they can also engage with that person. And lastly, we're going to talk about the concept of right-sizing an activity for them so they can still participate in that same activity or enjoyment of that activity, even as the disease progresses through the different stages. Before we begin, I wanted to put this slide in talking about dementia. Dementia is not a specific disease. It's a group of conditions characterized by impairment of at least two brain functions, such as memory loss and judgment. Symptoms can include forgetfulness, limited social skills, and problems with judgment and reasoning, significant enough that it interferes with daily functioning. Looking at this diagram, you can see that there's both reversible and irreversible causes of dementia. So if you begin to notice early changes in a loved one's ability to think and process, it's important to encourage them to go to the doctor to get it figured out, because it's very possible that some of the changes, some of the symptoms may be caused by things that can be treatable, such as depression, interactions with different types of drugs. They may have a B12 deficiency or a urinary tract infection, all of which you want to rule out first before jumping to the conclusion that it's something like a neurological disorder listed on the left side. This next slide has a video clip that I find very helpful in explaining what Alzheimer's is and how it affects a person's brain. I think it's important, as I said a couple minutes ago, for people to truly understand what's happening below the surface, if you will. And it helps us recognize that a person who has a dementia diagnosis is not intentionally getting up in the morning and trying to make your life difficult by asking the same questions or not understanding how to reason through something. I find this video clip is also handy to have available to show other friends and family who maybe don't understand or are really struggling to have patience with your loved one. This really helps illuminate and give insight. So let's take a listen.
What is Alzheimer's disease? Alzheimer's is a slow, fatal disease of the brain affecting 1 in 10 people over the age of 65. No one is immune. The disease comes on gradually as two abnormal protein fragments called plaques and tangles accumulate in the brain and kill brain cells. They start here in the hippocampus, the part of the brain where memories are first formed. Over many years' time, the plaques and tangles slowly destroy the hippocampus, and it becomes harder and harder to form new memories. Simple recollections from a few hours or days ago that the rest of us might take for granted are just not there. After that, more plaques and tangles spread into different regions of the brain, killing cells and compromising function wherever they go. This spreading around is what causes the different stages of Alzheimer's. From the hippocampus, the disease spreads here to the region of the brain where language is processed. When that happens, it gets tougher and tougher to find the right word. Next, the disease creeps toward the front of the brain, where logical thought takes place. Very gradually, a person begins to lose the ability to solve problems, grasp concepts, and make plans. Next, the plaques and tangles invade the part of the brain where emotions are regulated. When this happens, the patient gradually loses control over moods and feelings. After that, the disease moves to where the brain makes sense of things it sees, hears, and smells. In this stage, Alzheimer's wreaks havoc on a person's senses and can spark hallucinations. Eventually, the plaques and tangles erase a person's oldest and most precious memories, which are stored here in the back of the brain. Near the end, the disease compromises a person's balance and coordination. And in the very last stage, it destroys the part of the brain that regulates breathing and the heart. The progression from mild forgetting to death is slow and steady, and takes place over an average of 8 to 10 years. It is relentless and, for now, incurable. Helping your family, friends, and neighbors to better understand Alzheimer's will reduce stigma, improve care, and even help the fight for a cure. Thanks for helping to do your part. Learn more at www.aboutalz.org.
As I said, that is a great resource. So feel free to access that on a regular basis to help other loved ones have a better understanding. So in summary, what changes in a person's brain when they have Alzheimer's and dementia? And I will use those terms interchangeably because most often, if an older adult has a dementia diagnosis over the age of 65, in 2/3 of the cases, it's going to be Alzheimer's disease. And Alzheimer's can progress at different paces. So just because you get an early diagnosis, maybe at age 70, doesn't mean that you're going to immediately lose function. However, it's just helpful to kind of have an idea of what to expect. So memory. Memory is not just the knowledge of who we are and what we did together, but it's also knowledge of how to do things. You can imagine as memory becomes increasingly impacted, a person may no longer remember how to play a bridge game, for example, what the different rules are, or if they've made a move, or if it's somebody else's turn in a game. As the ability to understand language is impacted, the person might have a hard time understanding what is being said to them. They may also have a difficult time communicating an answer to a question. Executive function is controlled by the front part of the brain, and it affects our ability to be able to plan, to reason through things, to problem solve, and to have good judgment. So again, if a person is involved in an activity such as golfing, maybe if their judgment's impaired, they might not be able to score correctly. They may feel it's their turn. They may get anxious. And then the visual spatial perception is also affected by Alzheimer's disease and dementia. It affects the person's ability to interpret where things are in space. And that can definitely have an impact if the person was going to go dancing or play a sport. So keeping all these things in mind, it's not surprising that a person is going to begin to struggle to keep themselves occupied during the day. We don't even think about doing things that, calling things activities that we do because we just know what we want to do, and when we want to do it, we just automatically help ourselves. If I want to read a book, I'll go get the book. If I want to go play golf, I'll go out and arrange that. If I feel like going to the pool and laying out, I will orchestrate that. But when a person's no longer able to make sense of all these things and do those tasks for themselves, a lot of times they become very frustrated and depressed. Before I go into the actual portion that talks about how to spend time with a loved one with dementia, I wanted to first cover some basics on terms of communication. How we are understood by others depends on body language, tone of voice, and choice of words. And looking at this, you can see that only 7% of our choice of words has bearing on how others perceive what we want from them. And this is really good news when it comes to communicating with someone with Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia, because as people are less able to understand language, we can use body language and tone of voice to encourage them and connect with them and help them understand what we need from them. Given all the changes that are occurring in a person's brain when a dementia diagnosis is present, it's not surprising that they are often in a state of confusion. Confusion is never comfortable, so the confusion usually leads to discomfort. A person will become anxious or agitated, which leads to a behavior that maybe isn't something that's pleasant. Maybe because they're anxious, they're a little short with you, they're getting a little bit irritable with you, or they may become fearful. So all of this makes sense because typically if you see a change in a person's behavior, if you work backwards to figure out what's making them uncomfortable and then what caused that discomfort and look at the confusion, you can trace it back to the root. It's not surprising then that your loved one's ability to engage in their favorite activities is now going to be compromised. What used to be automatic for them to do is now confusing. So your role is to help them find new activities to keep themselves occupied or help them modify an activity so they can still participate in it and enjoy it. Most often you'll be able to reduce much of their anxiety and agitation, which triggers the majority of their unpleasant dementia-related behaviors, if you can engage them in some form of activity. Therefore, the goal of effective activities becomes to bring meaning, purpose, and stimulation and contentment to their everyday life. You're going to utilize your loved one's remaining strengths and talents and skills during any stage of their illness in order to help them be successful. And that requires constant evaluation to see where they're at on a given day. Remember that when someone has a dementia diagnosis, they can have good days and bad days just like you. They might not be able to do the right sizing piece of it themselves when it comes to an activity. So that's where your gentle guidance and encouragement can be helpful. Effective activities, in order to be considered effective, need to be done alone or with a care partner and can include family and friends. They will help normalize that person's life when all this chaos is going on in their brain. It's important to remember to focus on enjoyment rather than results. As you've probably heard before, it's the journey, not the destination, that becomes most important. It's important to think about a few things as you begin to sit down and plan activities. Remember that everything you do with a loved one is an activity. So completing a task is not necessarily an activity. Maybe just brushing a loved one's hair, as you see here, it's a way to connect, is an activity. You're always going to focus on the connection. The connection of you with that other person is the goal of the task. Which is not to say that if a person was competitive and wants to play cornhole with you, that you certainly can enjoy a round of healthy competition. But don't get frustrated if the person's not able to perform as well. Remember that the engaging and talking and laughing is all part of why the activity is important. And then no matter how far people with dementia have progressed in the disease process, remember that they never lose the desire to communicate and connect with you. So even if they can't use words and communicate in the same way, just know that that desire as a human being is always there. And to make that point, I ask people to think about for themselves, if all of a sudden they were sitting in their house with their spouse, they weren't able to talk anymore, they weren't able to access any of the things that they like to do. They couldn't pick up their laptop and play solitaire. They couldn't grab a book to read. They couldn't change the channel to watch a different TV program. They couldn't get up and call a friend on a phone. So if you couldn't do all of those things, think about how bored you would be and probably restless and agitated and irritable you would become. So this is similar to what a person in the middle stages of dementia might be experiencing. So now we're going to take a look at what is person-centered care and contented involvement. What do those terms mean? When you're figuring out an activity for someone to do, you want to think about a holistic approach, the whole person. You want to think about their physical well-being. Certainly you want to help them stay in shape and be active, but also think about their emotional well-being, their cognitive well-being. You want to make sure they're not bored. If someone was always interested in biographies and learning a lot about science and history, sitting them in front of cartoons is probably going to be very boring for them. That it's going to be underserving them. And also their spiritual well-being, which connects to their sense of purpose. When you're planning an activity for somebody, you want to focus on the term person-centered, thinking about what do they like to do? What does the person you're working with love to do? If they didn't like playing bingo when they were young, they might not enjoy it right now. So you want to make sure that you consider their history, their personal preferences and needs and interests. Some people really are extroverts and need to really crave being around other people. Maybe they're more of a loner. Maybe they like to be in a more quiet environment. Also consider the fact that going back to the slide where we learned about how this disease affects a person's brain, this disease affects their ability to filter out external stimuli. So depending on where they're at with the disease process, a person-centered approach would also consider maybe they need to be in a more quiet room. Maybe they need to just be around a couple of the grandkids when they come in rather than the whole baseball team of kids coming by that would come in and visit. And remember, activities don't need to be complicated, especially because the person might not be able to follow along and do the activity as they used to, but they need to be a fit. And that's where the person-centered approach comes. So when you sit down to try to think out ahead of time, what's some activities that you could participate with your loved one with? Sit down when you're not with the person and use your knowledge about who they are to plan some meaningful activities. Think about their preferred routines. Are they morning people or afternoon people? What are their habits, their dislikes, and their likes? Make sure that you're not planning something that you like to do, but maybe they wouldn't enjoy. Consider their pet peeves. Pet peeves are really important because pet peeves are something that maybe doesn't make sense to somebody else, but makes perfect sense to them. And if that pet peeve is not addressed, it's going to interfere with their ability to enjoy the activity that you've planned. Let me give you an example. When I first got married, I had no idea that my husband's pet peeve was me leaving cabinet doors or drawers open. So when I was doing the laundry, I put the laundry away and I thought he should be appreciative of the fact that I was doing the laundry. Had no idea that he could not stand that maybe the sock drawer was stuffed a little too tightly and I couldn't close all the way. So now think about it. If he's now 85 and sitting on the bed and has a caregiver maybe that's come in to help with some of the activities in our house, and that caregiver does not know that this is one of his pet peeves, if he's sitting on the bed looking at her putting away all of his clothes, he might begin to get very agitated and irritable, and that caregiver would have no idea that it was this pet peeve that was driving him to have this change in behavior. It had nothing to do with the fact that he didn't like her. It had to do with this pet peeve. So sometimes when you're making this list of things that the person might enjoy being involved with, it's helpful to reach out to other family and friends and brainstorm a list. And then put this on like a 5x7 index card that you can use to reference. Because it's hard to come up with activities in the moment sometimes. So when you want to then take your list of activities to try, take what you know, and you're going to use it to connect through a meaningful one-on-one activity or group activity. As you can see here, you can maybe share with your grandson that his granddad loves nothing better than to spend time with him. So then you can think about, if that's actually the most important, the heart of the activity is my husband spending time with his grandson, I'm going to have to think about, well, what does my grandson like to do? Well, over from this picture, you can see he enjoys video games. So think about, is there a way that you can maybe get your husband to enjoy these video games, or a simplified video game that both of them can play? And you're going to use the approach all the time to, particularly if your loved one is starting to become upset or anxious, you can use one of these soothing activities to quickly redirect them into something that's enjoyable for them. For example, you can, if your loved one loved playing cards before, but maybe they can't participate in like a bridge game, but maybe you can have some cards on hand to easily direct into a game of Go Fish, or maybe poker, or whatever they can still keep up with. You know what, honey? Why don't you sit down with me? I'd love to play a little game of cards here. Why don't we sit over here and play this? It may be very useful to distract them. This is an example of one of the photographs I mentioned by Kathy Greenblatt earlier. In it, you clearly see the person and not the dementia. Pictured here is a woman who had been a math teacher all of her life. And when she's now living in a facility in India, they learned that since she was a math teacher all of her life, she could still remember a lot of the different formulas. So they brought in a blackboard for her, and about 2 hours every day, she will stand in front of this blackboard and write formulas down. Do they mean anything? Has she changed them? Not important. The fact is that she feels very engaged, and it's helping her pass the time. She feels a sense of purpose that occupies her day. So very meaningful. And then the staff will come in and ask her how her class is going. So that's also a good reason why you want to make sure when you're thinking about activities to think about what that person did when they were younger and still working, because oftentimes you can tie that into creating an activity. The benefits of creating these person-centered activities are they improve the quality of life for the person you love that has a dementia diagnosis. It respects their individual dignity and sense of self-worth. If someone can't do things like they used to enjoy before, and they're just sitting there all day, there's a good chance they're getting depressed. And then the more depressed they are, the less likely they are going to want to try anything else in the future. And it can become a downward spiral. So if you can have them create these person-centered activities, it gives them a sense of purpose, makes them feel needed, provides opportunities for them to connect and socialize with you, and also redirects them away from negative thoughts and moods and behaviors. Contented involvement is a term that refers to an emotional state that occurs when someone is doing something that's keeping them occupied and engaged. We all practice contented involvement when we're doing something that we like. It's the zone between being overstimulated, when someone becomes anxious or agitated, and understimulated when they're bored or depressed. Families can help develop this short list of soothing activities that engage their loved one and bring them back to this state of contented involvement. And if a person is in this state and they're not agitated, as a caregiver, it will allow you to get other things done in your house and not have to worry about how to manage different behaviors or calm someone down. The other benefit is that once you become familiar with a list of activities that they seem to respond to favorably, you're going to be able to share this list with other people that your loved one enjoys having around. And if you can have your grandson or granddaughter come over and spend time with your husband or wife doing some of these activities, that's a form of respite for you, because that way it frees you up to even get up and cook dinner or do some other errands, and even just take a walk by yourself. So that's the purpose of activities. It really is a form of respite for you. Plus, it helps the person still stay connected in their world that's become very confusing for them. So here's a list of some activities. Daily routine activities that we don't typically think about as an activity are very much so. Some of the chores that we have to do every day, like dusting, sweeping, folding laundry, can be a great way for a person to pass the time. And you can ask for help. Honey, can you help me dust these window ledges? Give the person a clean cloth and point them in the direction. Can you rub this wall? Now, if you're thinking ahead of time, maybe that actually doesn't really need to be done, but it's something that they can do and feel that that they're helping and have a sense of need for. You can keep a basket of clean washcloths that need to be folded every day. When a person's in the more moderate form of dementia, they're not going to remember that they've maybe refolded this a couple times earlier in the day, but it'll make them feel, give them a sense of purpose. When meal times roll around, can they help you with food prep? Can they maybe help you toss a salad if they can't cut vegetables anymore? Can they stir some soup? Can they stir some cake batter? Can they help you set the table? Can they maybe help you rinse dishes and then you're going to dry them and put them away? And keep in mind, as I said earlier, connecting always overrides the task. It's not so important to have everything done perfectly as it is to be connecting and spending time together. Activities of personal care provide great ways to connect. Bathing, shaving rather, dressing. Maybe you can stage an activity. So in order to maybe encourage them to get dressed, you can take out their clothes and lay them out on the bed in the order that they have to put them on. Gives them a great feeling of independence. When it comes to personal care, sometimes a person with dementia might not want to do them. They're content to just wear the same thing. So one way to engage them and make it seem like a little bit more exciting is instead of saying, let's take a shower, hey, let's have a spa day or a day of beauty. We're going to wash your hair today, and I'm going to help you put your makeup on, and we're going to go out to lunch. That sounds a lot more fun than just getting dressed and taking a shower. Or instead of saying dressed up, hey, let's play dress up today. We're going to get all dressed up and we're going to go for a walk. And we never get dressed up. Let's put something on special today. It may encourage them to get a little bit more excited about something. And then tasks from a previous career can include collating, sorting through mail, looking at a Wall Street Journal. Even if they can't read the Wall Street Journal anymore, it provides something that's familiar and comforting to them to hold if they used to be in the stock exchange, for example. So look at your daily routines and routines that they used to do and see if you can portion they can still do. This is another example of the photographs by Kathy Greenblatt. Here, this woman really had a difficult time wanting to shower. She didn't feel comfortable. The sensory part of her brain began to be affected by Alzheimer's, and it wasn't comfortable or calming for her to take a shower. She didn't like the water over her head, but she always loved her spa treatments. And they were able to, in this facility, continue to get her hair done, or hair cleaned by suggesting that she go to the beauty salon. And as you can see, she's very much engaged in enjoying her time here. Certain activities that involve repetition are also great choices to occupy a person with dementia, such as raking leaves, sweeping, folding washcloths. Blowing bubbles is a fun one to do, especially if kids are around. Finger painting. You can have them wash and dry silverware, sorting playing cards, matching socks. Now, you might think to yourself, well, I don't need my socks matched, or I don't need to have them brush my dog's hair. But again, that's not the point. You're creating an activity that helps that person feel content and involved and engaged, that's going to help them remain calm and enjoy their day so they don't become restless or anxious. Here you see an older woman, and although she's in her third son's house, and they do have a care person coming in on a regular basis to help her with care, you can see that her granddaughter engages regularly with her in prayer. So again, providing that meaningful engagement so that she feels tied to her previous life and feels connected. Other activities, again, look at all different aspects of wellness. Activities are not just physical, although, taking a walk or playing a game outdoors, such as cornhole, is wonderful. Other things to consider is the activity stimulating the creative part of their brain, especially if they used to be very artistic. They can play the piano. If a person has played a musical instrument all their life, there's a good chance that even though they can't initiate the activity on their own, for example, in the case of the piano, if you sat down on the piano bench with them and started playing a familiar song, they may be able to jump in and play alongside you. You want to stimulate their intellectual part of wellness, such having them read, do puzzles, internet games, or read to them, or have somebody read to them if they're not able to read anymore. Make sure that you include social functionings. People still like to be around people and to feel connected. I think COVID really underscored how important it is to stay connected. So, can you take them out for coffee, even if you just meet one person? Play a game, listen to music, go to some of the squares and just take a look, golf cart ride and people watch. Um, Spiritual well-being includes things like prayers or listening to hymns, or just connecting in nature is also an example of a spiritual activity. You can do things spontaneously, like let's grab a coat and we're going to go out and golf cart ride, or let's go for a drive. We're going to go just take a ride. If a person has trouble getting ambulating and moving around too much, car trips are great. And they can be short too. Work-related activities really validate that person's sense of purpose and who they are, especially if they've lost memory back to a point in their lives where they were still working. So have opportunities for them to fix something or sort something. Again, reinforcing that sense of purpose. Here you see Jeanette, and she was involved in her music therapy sessions even into the very end of her life. And again, look at her expression. She is not bored. She is engaged and enjoying her time. It's important to remember, how would you want to be treated if you had a dementia diagnosis? Would you want to be left sitting and not engaging in any activities? That would be depressing. So again, we have an opportunity to try to create a different environment for a person with dementia and make it calming and close to how it used to be for them. So that's where I'm going to introduce the concept of right-sizing activities to match these changing abilities. As people progress through the disease, the activities are going to have to be adapted and simplified. They can still continue to do the activities I love as long as they're right-sized. Families will need to provide more and more assistance. This doesn't mean that you have to take over and do everything for them, but you can certainly help out. It's important to adjust your expectations. It's not so much maybe about competing, but about spending time together. It'll become increasingly important to add more sensory related activities as the disease progresses in the later stage. Another example of modeling that it's important to always focus on the person, not the disease. This lady engaged in finger painting with a very young child, and the kites are where the workshop on making the kites were the activity for them to connect. And you can clearly see they're both engaged, enjoying their time. Children see past the impairment. They're not interested in whether their grandmother makes the best kite possible. They're interested in feeling loved by that grandmother and spending time. Sensory activities become increasingly important as the disease progresses and the person's brain is no longer able to maybe plan, reason, or organize things that they see. But they are very able to appreciate activities of the five senses. So the next few slides, I'm going to walk you through some examples of things that you might find helpful. Sensory activities of touch are wonderful, as long as you make sure that the person is okay with you touching them. You also don't want to surprise them and suddenly grab them if they don't know you're there, so that you'll startle them. Ask for permission. And for example, you can take their hand if they seem to be receptive and say, okay, can I put some lotion on? Now you might be thinking, I thought you just said that they might not understand language. That's true, but again, we want to show dignity and respect. And there's a good chance if you take a bottle of lotion and hold it up, they're going to understand what you want to do. Giving hand lotion massages, making sure not to bruise their hands, brushing their hair, bring in an animal that they can pet. You can have them sculpt non-toxic clay or finger paint. Sensory activities of sight include laminating pictures of things that were interesting to that person to look at. If they can't get out and enjoy hiking anymore, but you know that they used to love animals and nature, you can laminate pictures even from magazines or grab coffee table books where they can look at photos. It doesn't have to be photos of what they used to do or from their actual past, but it can be photos of things that they found interesting before. Remember, their brain is processing things different with a dementia diagnosis, so just being able to look at things is stimulating. And you can have these laminated photos ready to go when you have family and friends come by. You can have them sit down and flip through these things together with them. You can take them bird watching. Getting a bird feeder and putting it outside the window is a wonderful way for them to spend time watching. Or you can just take them people watching. Sound is amazing. There's a lot of research that's been done that shows that if people listen to familiar music that they liked while they were growing up, it can stimulate parts of the brain where for a short period of time, they're more lucid and they're able to speak, even if they haven't spoken in a long time, or to sing that song. Again, you want to make sure it's music that they enjoy. You can also read them books. You can have books on tape, poetry, scripture, or read a magazine or a newspaper article to them. Smell is very powerful. It's the one scent that has, it's the one sense that has a direct connection to the brain. So stimulating the brain with wonderful way to stimulate them. Essential oils are great. You can put the oils on various things, their bed pillows, as long as they're favorable to them, they might really enjoy them. You can use fragrant lotions for the hand massages, and then also just cooking foods that have wonderful smells in the baking cookies or bread together. And lastly, it's helpful to take all this information and make an activity box specific to your loved one. You can choose to make it focus on things that they used to enjoy when they had their career. For example, if someone used to be an office worker, you can put things in there like a notebook, pens, highlighters, paper clips. You can also put like a lot of junk mail that they can sort through so that they are going to have that connection to that job that they used to have and see what they do, see how they organize it. If the person doesn't seem interested in that, try something else. Here you see maybe a baby doll. Maybe that's going to remind them when they were younger. Some people have mixed feelings about using toys to stimulate a loved one if they have memory loss. But remember, they are not perceiving their environment the same way. And it's possible that like an animal, a stuffed animal could bring, or a baby doll could bring comfort to them. Because remember, it's not about us, it's about them. And whatever is bringing them enjoyment at that moment is the goal. If a person used to be a handyman or a handy person, you can put some nuts and bolts together, some swatches of yarn that they can tie, or rather rope that they can tie and untie. So just kind of brainstorm with other families and friends to keep things in this box that will occupy the person. Or if they used to travel, you can put maps and airplane tickets. It's helpful to have things in a box because when you have other people come and visit, you can pull out this box and encourage them to use it and to connect in a meaningful way when when they are unfamiliar with how to connect with that person anymore now that the dementia has set in. It's helpful on all accounts. So that's our presentation on how to right-size activities and engage with somebody once they have a dementia diagnosis. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to the Villages Health Learning Center. We also have a wonderful dementia support program for people who have a primary care doctor in the Villages Health. We are working on making that service available to others outside of the Villages Health. However, right now, it is being piloted just for members who have a primary care doctor in the Villages Health. And Melissa Denham is the person who runs that. So if you are interested, contact the Villages Health Learning Center and they can give you more information. I hope that you've enjoyed this and find it useful. Thank you so much for your participation.